In the least surprising news of the last decade, it turns out that Joe Biden is sick. That's right, stop the presses. The former president was diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer earlier this week, and in other news, water is still wet. Now, I don't want to downplay someone being ill, and I hope that President Biden beats cancer with no problem whatsoever. However, we would be in the first year of his second term if he had stuck in the race, and he has a 30% chance of living for the next 5 years. Either people around the president knew that he was sick while he was running for office, or they deliberately held off on testing so that they wouldn't have to confirm it. And before you ask, how could anyone be so evil as to endanger an elderly man for their own benefit? Remember that much of what went on in the White House during the end of Biden's presidency was run by his son, Hunter. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. We have 3 topics that we are going to be going over this week. Okay, Winnie, why don't you calm down? She's bumping into the microphone. Oh, she wants to say hi. Hello. Ugh. Say hi, Winnie. You never want to talk. There's the most talkative cat in the world. She never talks when you hold her, though. I don't know what the deal is. She's shy when the microphone's in front of her. Yet if she sits on the floor right here next to me, you'll hear her yowling for this entire video. Anyway, our 3 topics for the week. We're going to be talking about Joe Biden's new cancer diagnosis, which is obviously the biggest news of the week. The mayor of Chicago being investigated by the DOJ. And then briefly, we're going to talk about Nancy Macy showing some nude photos of herself to Congress, which sounds fun. But first, my favorite comment from last week comes from Caillou Has No Rights, at Caillou Has No Rights. And they said that, quote, loved the video. And I had a little back and forth with this person, but that's the part that I like. They said that they loved the video. This was talking about the Kanye West short that was put out last week. I thank you, Caillou. I appreciate the nice comments that we get every so often here on the Chrestman Conversation, especially when so many people on the comments of that video in particular seem that it's funny to jump on the Kanye bandwagon and just pretend that they actually like a song praising Adolf Hitler. I don't know if it's bots. I don't know if it's just teenagers who think it's edgy to pretend to have some sort of affinity towards Nazism. Whatever it is, it's gross and it's stupid. Don't do that. There's no reason. That Kanye song is bad. It's a bad song. And he's a bad guy. I don't know what to tell you. He's a bad person. So, great musical producer. Made some great raps, great albums. I really enjoy Kanye as a musical artist. But he's a garbage human being, and I don't think that you should like a song praising Hitler. But anyway, Caillou, thank you for the comment. Really, really appreciate it. Anyway, let's go on to topic 1. I just can't believe it. Joe Biden's sick. So, in the biggest news of the week, I can't think of a story that was bigger than this. There's a couple things I wanted to talk about that don't seem as important as this for a couple reasons we're going to get into. But I want to go over some nuts and bolts here first. And the basic facts as we see them right now is that Joe Biden just got diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. Now, it has metastasized, which basically that's just a fancy word for saying it has spread. And it's spread into the bone. So this is not a good prognosis. It's a bad thing when any cancer that you have, doesn't matter where it is, whenever it metastasizes, whenever it goes from one place to another place, that's a different thing. Whenever you catch cancer in the early stages, it hasn't spread typically. It is just in the one spot, and it's easier to treat or remove or do whatever it is you need to do to make sure that those cells die off and don't spread. After it's metastasized, it's a different thing. It becomes something incredibly more difficult to control in most cases, and that is certainly the case in prostate cancer. Prostate cancer is the second most common form of cancer among men after skin cancer. Skin cancer is the most common. Prostate cancer is right there. Prostate cancer, it was basically said to me one time, and I believe this, which is that men, for whatever reason, men are either going to die or get prostate cancer. It just depends. You either die early and don't have prostate cancer, or you live long enough to get prostate cancer. It seems that the prostate, for whatever reason, is just prone to cancer in a way that we don't necessarily understand why. I don't know why everyone seems to get prostate cancer. It's like people all wind up with skin cancer after being out in the sun too long. Well, men, if you live long enough, will get prostate cancer. That just seems to be the way it goes. And so you either die or eventually get prostate cancer. But it has, the nice thing about prostate cancer, if there is a nice thing, is that it has a very high survival rate. The 5-year prognosis on prostate cancer is 97% survival rate. Very few people die of prostate cancer. That changes, though, when you have the kind that Joe Biden has. When the cancer is caught too late, or not too late to save necessarily, but when it's caught later in the process, and it metastasizes. So when it has spread to other parts of the body, your survival rate goes from 97%, you have a 60% drop off, and it goes down to 37%. So Joe Biden right now has a 37% chance of living for 5 years. Now, if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago before this diagnosis if I thought Joe Biden was going to live another 5 years, I probably would have said no. Nothing against Joe Biden. He just seems very, very old. He just seems like an elderly man. He's already lived much past the life expectancy in the United States. I think the average, I can't remember now off the top of my head if it's 77 or 78, but I think the average life expectancy for men in the United States is either 77 or 78, and I think Joe Biden is 82. I think I have it written down here somewhere. I think Joe Biden is 82. So he's already lived past the average life expectancy, and now he has an aggressive form of prostate cancer. The odds of him seeing what would have been a second term seem very, very low, in my opinion. And we're not hoping for that, obviously. I think that's pretty clear by the intro in this. We don't want anyone to get cancer. Cancer's bad. I don't wish it on. As I say that, I might wish it on some of the worst people in the world, but that certainly doesn't qualify Joe Biden. He was a bad president. Doesn't make him a terrible, terrible, awful human being who deserves prostate cancer. He's not, the leader of Al-Qaeda or ISIS, one of those guys. I might wish prostate cancer on them, but not Joe Biden. Joe Biden seems like a okay guy. So we're not hoping for anything bad. We hope he's fine, but just saying, trying to be objective, the odds of him living 5 years prior to this diagnosis didn't seem that high to me, especially when you look at a couple factors for his case specifically. So prostate cancer is graded on something called the Gleason score. And basically what they do is they take some of the cancerous cells and they look at them under a microscope and they see how fast they grow, and it gives you a score. 1 being, hey, you're great. And 10 being, oh gosh, this is a problem. And so Joe Biden's at a 9. Now, anything over an 8 is considered a high-risk cancer. So a 9 is not a great score. Obviously, it's not the worst score, but there's a lot of scores that would have been better than a 9. So his cancer is growing at a fast rate, which is not great. And this is the part that leads to a lot of questions from people. How did this cancer, prostate cancer tends to be a slow-moving cancer. How did he go from having no cancer diagnosis, no indicators of cancer diagnosis, to now having a cancer that has, not only it's in the prostate, but it's metastasized into the bone? How did he get that? How did he go from nothing to this like that? And the answer is that he did not. He didn't do that. It's not what happened whatsoever. The odds are, and here are a couple other facts, that Joe Biden hasn't had a prostate-specific antigen test, a PSA, done since 2014, so 11 years ago. Now, it's true that men over 70, you don't have to get one of those done every year. They recommend them for people under the age of 70. So I think from 50 to 69, they say you should be doing one of these at your yearly physical. They stopped doing it over 70, and there's a number of reasons why that they stopped recommending it for regular people. I think that the not getting a PSA done is nonsense. I don't know why you wouldn't do it if you're the president of the United States, especially because the American public kind of has a right to know if their leader has cancer. Donald Trump is over 70. He gets a PSA done on his yearly exam. He puts the results out for people to see that he doesn't have any issues. So I don't see why this wouldn't be the case for Joe Biden, especially when you consider the fact that in 2019, Joe Biden needed surgery on his prostate. He had an enlarged prostate. It turned out it was benign. He had a benign tumor on his prostate, and it was removed. He was treated with surgery and medicine, and he was fine. 2019, this happened. So why wouldn't you be checking this? Apparently, he hasn't had a test in 11 years. And what were they doing yearly? How did this go unnoticed for so long until it became this giant issue, especially someone with a history of growth on the prostate? Why would you not be checking this just from a medical perspective? And the answer is that they have obviously known about this. He didn't develop this cancer in the last 100 days. It's not what happened. This isn't something that's developed in the last 200 days. This has been years. Joe Biden he's got the best medical care in the world available to him. He gets exams done regularly. The odds that he's had a normal blood test done in the last year and a half to 2 years, astronomically small. There's no way that his blood count hasn't been, like, for example, his white cell count hasn't been elevated in his blood. There's no way that a doctor, a reasonable doctor, is looking at his blood work and saying, oh, this is a healthy man. What his doctor is not doing is apparently following up with these things because it would have looked bad on his presidency and when he was running for president. He should have been, this was something that was kept from people. This isn't a new diagnosis. He didn't leave office and then they say, oh my gosh, now he has cancer. What terrible timing. He's had cancer for 2 years, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, somewhere around there. He knew, or somebody knew, my guess is. I can't say this for an absolute fact. Somebody knew that he had cancer in the last year. I will almost promise you that. And it's either his physician or his family. His family probably knows. Remember, they lied about cancer in the past. They've tried to cover it up with his son. They kind of downplayed how bad his cancer was. They didn't tell the public. I'm not saying, in the case of his son, I'm not saying people had a right to know. But when you're the president of the United States, you're running for the highest office in the land, people actually do have a right to know. Your health records are actually a matter of public security. It's national security. It's not just you and your doctor and HIPAA applies and everyone just has to be real secretive, hush, hush, hush. That's not the way it works anymore. And I'm actually I think this would be a good idea. I think that Congress, if they want to do anything useful, they should pass a law that the president of the United States or people running for office have to release their full medical records every year. They have to go and release their medical records every year. See, what happens right now is that people think the presidents do that. They don't really do that. They have their own personal physician who goes and is like, hey, you're good. And then he comes out there and he'll raise two thumbs to the press and he goes, this is the healthiest man I've ever seen. Joe Biden yesterday was running a 4.40. I saw him bench press 225, 15 reps. He was going to go for the combine record, but I said, Joe, remember, you got a shoulder problem. So I had to slow him down and keep him back. That's not a real physical. The doctor, I'm not saying he's not giving medical care to the president, but the president's personal physician going out and just giving a thumbs up and saying to the press in the country, hey, the president's healthy as could be. That's not really what I'm talking about. Congress should make it a law that you have to go in. You have to have, I don't know, yearly blood work, urinalysis. You should have a couple screenings like a PSA if you're over a certain age, or even just a PSA in general for men. But you should be doing these things. You should be running these tests, and then you should just release them. You should say, hey, here you go. Maybe not to the general public, but maybe to Congress. And if they're fine, you should have no problem just releasing your blood work and saying, oh, yeah, my cholesterol might be a little high, or my blood pressure is a little high, and I'm on a medication that's fine, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the case is, this should be a law because the American people had a right to know that Joe Biden had cancer when he was running for office. Now, I get he dropped out, and Kamala Harris filled in, and even if things had gone, it would be Kamala in the office and not Joe. But let's not forget, how long did they leave? 100 days for Kamala to run a campaign? Joe Biden was 100 days from going into an election for the highest honor in the land, the position of the most powerful man in the world, and he was riddled with cancer. And he probably was at the time. I think it's very safe to assume that he was because, again, this cancer didn't sprout up in the last 100 days. It didn't. It has been growing slowly for quite a long time, and this is a matter for people to address, and yes, it's something that should have been told to voters. So it's not a good thing that the Bidens have a history of lying about this stuff because it just tarnishes their legacy. I do not think that Joe Biden's physical and mental decline is going to reflect well on whatever legacy they hope to leave behind. I think this new book by Jake Tapper is going to be eye-opening for people. You can think whatever you want about Jake Tapper. I know sometimes he's done some things that I like. I say, hey, that's great. Jake Tapper, he's holding people accountable. He's saying the hard truths. This is great. And then sometimes you like this book, you're kind of going, oh, Jake, isn't that you? You're talking about this cover-up of Joe Biden's decline, but like, didn't you do that? I remember we got those clips of the show when one of the Trump associates is on there talking about Joe Biden's mental decline in his cognitive ability, and you said, there's no evidence about this. This is a conspiracy theory, right wing, blah, blah, blah. And now you're writing a book about it. It just seems a little ridiculous. However, it is nice. He's doing the mea culpa. He's going on saying, yeah, I could have been better. Journalism should have been better. The Democrats should have been more honest. I think these stories about the ability of the Democratic Party to lie, the ability of the Bidens to mislead and cover up, I think all of these are going to be eye-opening. And I think the Democratic Party is going to go through hell for it. And I think that it's a good thing, because I do think that party has been incredibly dishonest and undemocratic, by the way. Kamala Harris just appointed herself Joe Biden's successor. There was no primary. There was no anything. There was no open convention. It just said, Kamala Harris gets it. Why? No one wanted her. I don't know why. But and she lost in an embarrassing way to Donald Trump, who, remember, half of the country hates Donald Trump. And she lost in a landslide to him. What does that say about her? It's a terrible look. But anyway, this Biden thing, it's not going to go away. And his legacy is going to be harmed from this. There's no sailing off into the sunset as a transformational president who did so much great things for the economy in the country. He was a terrible president. One of the worst presidents of all time. I really do believe that. That's not just me saying that. Joe Biden is the reason I'm not going to vote for Democrats anymore. And people don't understand that. But it's the last 4 years. I don't know. I'm trying to remember when I started doing this show. Joe Biden is the worst president of my lifetime, and it's not even close. I didn't live through Carter. I wasn't born when Carter was president. I was born in the 90s, people. Okay. So I wasn't alive when Carter was president. So it's not even close that Joe Biden was the worst president of my lifetime, bar none. There's not even a competition. Clinton was a good president. I don't remember, obviously, the first George Bush presidency, but, he's fine. His son, I actually thought was an okay president. I know people don't want to hear that, but I think he did some good things. Then you had Barack Obama, who, again, I think he was actually a transformational president. He did some things that I don't agree with now. At the time, I thought they were great. I thought, hey, expanding the healthcare system, I thought these things were great, but Obama I don't agree with a lot of what he did now. I think he was not as good of a president as I thought when he was elected, or when he was, after his first term. But at the time, it's fine. And then you have Trump. I thought Trump was a great president for 3 years, and the COVID thing kind of flubbed it, but most people did, so give him a pass. And then Joe Biden came along and just wrecked the economy, didn't do anything good. I don't know what Joe Biden can look to as his presidency and say, this was my accomplishment. This was the thing that I can hold up and say, I did this better than anyone. Nothing. Terrible on immigration, terrible on the economy, largest inflation in 40 years, bad with foreign powers, did Afghanistan debacle, the worst presidency of my lifetime, and it's not even close. And so this whole... talking about his cancer, I think they were surprised by the blowback that people are upset about this, but I don't know why. I do not know. I don't understand why they're upset, or why they don't understand why people don't like them. And it's because of stuff like this, because obviously the way you lied about his cognitive decline, you were lying about his cancer, or you just wanted to pretend it didn't exist for your own benefit so Hunter and Ashley and his brother could continue to line their pockets. Anyway, let's move on. We could talk about Joe Biden all day, but we don't want to, because, we can forget about him. So let's move on. Topic 2, why is Brandon Johnson so racist? And Brandon Johnson, for those people who don't know, Brandon Johnson is the mayor of Chicago. Terrible mayor. Lori Lightfoot was a terrible mayor. Brandon Johnson's a terrible mayor. Chicago, why can't you elect good mayors? I don't know when the last one was. Rahm Emanuel, wasn't he the mayor of Chicago at some point? I really don't know. I don't follow Chicago politics closely, so I'm not sure. The only reason I follow Chicago politics is because the last 2 mayors have been awful, and they make national news with how terrible they are all the time. So Brandon Johnson, he was giving a talk, and he made some comments while giving a talk about how he prioritizes hiring black people for his administration. And so we don't misrepresent what he said, I'm going to play a little bit for you right now.
The deputy mayor is a black woman. Department of Planning and Development is a black woman. Infrastructure deputy mayor is a black woman. Chief operations officer is a black man. Budget director is a black woman. Senior advisor is a black man. And I'm laying that out because when you ask how do we ensure that our people get a chance to grow their business, having people in my administration that will look out for the interests of everyone, and everyone means you have to look out for the interests of black folks.
The Justice Department cited...
Okay, so that is what we are talking about. He was given this talk, and he talked about how he prioritizes hiring black people. Then he went on to list a bunch of really prominent positions in his administration. Hey, this one's a black woman. Hey, this guy's a black man. A black woman, black man, blah, 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 blah. And this caused the Department of Justice to send him a letter to inform him that they were opening an investigation into him and the city of Chicago for violating federal law. What law, might you ask, are they violating? Well, they are actually in violation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which, ironically, was the law that prohibited segregation and race-based discrimination in hiring. So it was a law initially designed historically to stop the discrimination in the U.S. against black people. Now, it's important. I think in the 60s, you could make a great argument for these kind of laws. The Civil Rights Act, affirmative action, there was a really good argument to be made for these laws and why they were important, because we had 400 years of slavery followed by 100 years of Jim Crow laws. And in the 60s, we said all of this is done. You had, in 1954, you had Brown versus Board of Education, which integrated the schools. You had overturned Plessy versus Ferguson, got rid of separate but equal. All of these things happened in the 50s and 60s. And so you say, at the time, hey, it makes sense. Why, when you're looking at whatever, you're looking at education, you're looking at the economy, you're looking at generational wealth, you look at all these metrics and you say, well, black people are behind white people in fill in the blank, whatever metric you want. And you say, well, we need something to close that gap. And so we came up with these laws, the affirmative action, the Civil Rights Act, and there was a great argument, I think, to be made at the time that you could say, hey, we are going to do this because this will allow black people to have some ability to compete freely in the market, because you're not going to be able to discriminate against them based on their race. And I think that that's a good thing. You shouldn't be discriminating against people based on their race. That doesn't really need to be said. The problem with what has happened in the last 60 years is that now we've had, again, the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. It's currently 2025. We've had 61 years of this law. And the answer is now, in 2025, do these laws make it better? Or do they make it worse? Or do they not change anything at all? If they don't change anything at all, we should get rid of them. Do they make things better? The answer is no. They haven't made things better. You can demonstrate that. We could go over the facts and data. We could do this all day, and I would be happy to dismantle the argument that affirmative action has made things better for black people. It wouldn't actually be me. It would be, there's a great book behind me. You can't really see it right now, but there's a great book behind me by Thomas Sowell called Discrimination and Disparities. I wouldn't be the one to debunk this. Thomas Sowell absolutely would be the one to debunk this. And so these laws have prevented discrimination against black people historically. That's kind of the point. Now, the Department of Justice is saying, actually the laws aren't written to prevent the discrimination against black Americans. They're not written that way at all. They're just written to stop race-based discrimination. And so what we've seen now in the last decade is that as much as people want to attempt to redefine racism or talk stupid words like reverse racism is racism, people. Racism, one, does not involve power structures. Any attempt to redefine racism to involve the word power is only an attempt to play a political game. Don't let anyone do that. If anyone tries to tell you that racism, for example, black people can't be racist because they don't have the power structure, that person's playing a Marxist game with language. Don't allow that. It's not true. Racism is prejudice and discrimination, or prejudice based on race. That's what it is. Bigotry based on race. That's all racism is. You can be racist against anyone. I could be white and be racist against white people. That would still make me a racist. I could be white and hate black people or Asian people, whatever it is. I can be black and hate any of the following groups, or Asian and hate any of the following groups, and be a racist. That's kind of the way that word works. But we've pretended for a long time that, for example, black people can't be racist, which is nonsense. Obviously, anyone can be racist because racism is just hating other groups based on racial discrimination. It's disgusting in all cases. You should never stand for it. But we've kind of allowed it when it goes one way and not the other. And so what we've seen is people like Brandon Johnson who say, hey, I'm actually actively discriminating against white people in the hiring of positions because I want to help black people. And you say, hey, that actually is discriminatory against white people. It's great to say, I'm not going to discriminate against black people. This is a great thing to do. We don't want to discriminate against anyone. But you can't solve historical discrimination with current discrimination. That's not the way it works. It doesn't work that way. You can't solve old racism with new racism. It just creates backlash. It just creates more racism. It's like saying you can't solve fire with more fire. It doesn't work that way. You solve fire with water. Okay? That's kind of the way it works. You don't solve historical discrimination with current discrimination. What you do is say discrimination is bad, abolish it, and allow black people to rise to the same level as their white counterparts. That is the way it works. You don't need to give black people a hand up or push white people down. You just allow people to rise. And that's kind of what the idea used to be of equality. Everybody, you get rid of the barriers. You allow people access into the markets and access into the places, and you allow them to participate freely without hindering them. And some will rise and some will fall, and that's kind of the way that the game is played. But what happens now is that you don't allow people to race freely. What you do is you throw obstacles down in front of the ones that do too well. You try and hamper them, or you're trying to give a boost to the people, but you can't make everyone rise to the top. It doesn't work that way. You can only push people to the bottom. So Brandon Johnson is discriminating against white people. He admits it there. He's talking about how he only hires black people for these roles and this and that. And so the Department of Justice is doing what they should do, which is saying racism is wrong. We don't care the races involved. If you flip the races, it's a game that gets annoying to play. But if you flip the races and you say the exact same thing and it sounds terrible, then you shouldn't be saying it. So when Brandon Johnson says, well, Department of this, the head of this is a black woman and the head of this is a black man, and I do this and I hire, what he says is our people. I hire our people because our people know how to take care of people and blah, 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 blah. This is annoying. It's an annoying game to play because it's so obvious that a child would see it, but apparently very intelligent people, quote unquote, Brandon Johnson doesn't see it. If you flip the races and it sounds bad, then you shouldn't be doing it. So if I were to go up there, as I don't know if you can tell, if you're not watching, maybe you don't know, I happen to be white. If I went up there and I said, I only hire white people because white people take care of people better, and my head of staff is a white woman and my blah, blah, blah is a white man and a white woman and a white man and blah, 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 blah. Everyone will go, damn, get this guy a Klan hood. Why is he so racist? Why doesn't he hire some black people? What's wrong with him? But Brandon Johnson goes up there and everyone claps. They go, oh, how stunning, how brave. You're an amazing human being. You're doing a great job. Ooh, actually, wait. One of these. Hold on. Wait for it. Laugh. Oh, there it is. There it is. Oh, my gosh. Brandon Johnson. That's the crowd at the Brandon Johnson rally. They're going, oh, Brandon Johnson, you're so brave. You're so stunning and brave. It's just racism, people. Quit clapping. I don't know what's wrong with you. You don't fix that with clapping and more racism. It's ridiculous. And so he put out a statement because obviously Brandon Johnson didn't do anything wrong. According to him, he's saying, hey, there's nothing wrong with me just saying I want to hire a bunch of black people. That's the way it is. So he put out a statement. And he said, this is the quote from the statement. It says, quote, we're not going to be intimidated. First of all, just to jump in real quick, whenever you're writing in an official way, you should avoid using apostrophes. You don't say we're, W-E apostrophe R-E. Say we are. Just say it because it sounds better. Apostrophes are for shortening words. It's more casual. So if you're doing official government writing, don't use apostrophes or conjunctions to make words like this, like we're. Don't do that. Say we are. We are not going to be intimidated by the tyranny that's coming from the federal government. The diversity of our city is our strength. Okay, whatever, I guess, Brandon Johnson. First of all, I hate that phrase. The diversity is our strength. No, it's not. It really isn't. The diversity is nobody's strength, by the way. There is no evidence to say that a more diverse group of people is better at anything. Except maybe dying of disease, all right? That might be the only thing. But in terms of ideas, in terms of inventions, in terms of athletic performance, there's nothing that says having diversity is actually a strength. I do not see why that would be the case, especially when you're dividing by race. Imagine that we have a room, and in that room are 12 peoples of different ethnic backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds. There's on one chair you got a white upper class woman, and the other one you have a undocumented Hispanic woman who makes no wages, and the other one's a black guy who's kind of just got a regular blue collar job. You have all these people in this room. And then in the other room, you have 12 white men, and you give them any task to do. And you say, oh, obviously, this more diverse group over here is going to outperform a group of 12 white men just because their diversity is their strength, obviously. This room has no diversity. How could they ever accomplish anything? And then this room's obviously done with the problem, and this room's going, we can't even communicate with each other. We don't speak the same language. Imagine the Tower of Babel right here. You got 12 people from different countries, and you say, they're so diverse. Of course they're going to solve any problem better than 12 people of homogenous ethnicity. Why wouldn't that be the case? Because diversity is not a strength. It really isn't. Diversity is a good thing for ideas. Having diverse ideas in a room allows you to bounce ideas off each other in unconventional ways and come up with solutions. If 12 people are in the room and they all have the same ideas, that's a dumb room to be in. You don't want to be in that room because that room has no good ideas. Because if you can't pressure test your ideas against people who disagree with you, it doesn't matter how smart you are. You're playing tennis without a net, and you cannot get better. So I hate that phrase. I could go on a rant about that just in case. Brandon Johnson also released some statistics which were interesting. It says the last census shows that Chicago's population is 39% white and nearly an equal number of Latino and black residents. There's 28% Latino and 28% black residents, 7% are Asian. They said a spokesman for Johnson then released and said, well, only 34% of our administration is black, 30% are white, 24% Hispanic, and 7% Asian. Now think about that for 1 second. Imagine that. Brandon Johnson gets accused of racism. The DOJ launches an investigation into his hiring practices. They reach out to a spokesman. The spokesman goes with this little sheet of paper, and he just reads off, well, actually, 34% of our employees are black, 30% are white, 24% are Hispanic, and 7% are Asian. How can you accuse us of being racist with numbers like this? Why do you have those numbers so ready to go is my first question. Why do you know that? Just off the top of your head. It's such a weird stat to just have prepared. You weirdos. Why do you just know this without, how long did it take you to check? Did you have it in your pocket? Why did you so quickly get back to the DOJ with prepared numbers about your hiring practices? It's because you obviously care about the race of people involved. Because you're tracking this. You're obviously tracking this. And if you're tracking this, it's obviously a metric you're using to hire people, which means that you're violating the law. By hiring people based on their race, it's a violation of federal law. It's like, because you know this, just off the cuff, you're obviously concerned about the race involved. If I had a company, and I had to hire 100 people for whatever task, and I was like, well, we need 34% black, 30% white, 24% Hispanic, and 7% Asian. You'd be like, why? Why do we need these things? And I'd be like, well, it's just really important to me. I just think that, I think it'd be really good if we just had 34% of the workforce be black. You'd be like, that doesn't make any sense. How does that help us with our company? How does that help us do anything? And I'd be like, 34% black, get out of here, go do it, hire it, because I'm the boss, obviously, and I can tell you what to do in this fantasy world where I run a racist company. And so obviously they're violating federal law, and it wouldn't make my workforce any better, by the way. If I'm hiring based on this practice, the reality is if I owned a company and I wanted to hire people, I would say, what are your qualifications for the job? And then if they were like, I'm black, I'd be like, okay, next, please. What does that have to do with what the question I just asked you? If you were coming to me and you're saying, well, you should hire me because I'm black, I'd be like, no, what? I wouldn't hire you because you're white. Why would I hire you because you're black? Hire people based on a crazy idea, based on merit. It's almost like we could live in a meritocracy, maybe, or a place where people who are good at things get better jobs, and people who are good at things get better opportunities, and people who dedicate themselves to certain crafts rise over time and people who don't fall to the bottom. It maybe something like that would be beneficial. At least that's how I'd run my company, not how Brandon Johnson wants to do it. Anyway, I'm interested to see where this goes. If you think about it for a second, like no one would ever ask me in my personal life about these statistics. They say, hey, can you do a racial breakdown of your friends? And then I just was like, oh yeah, 34 black, 18% Hispanic, 6 Asians. You'd be like, okay, hold on. What? I was kidding. Why do you know these numbers, you weirdo? Again, I wouldn't be able to tell you because it doesn't matter. It's not important to me. And if it's important to you, seek therapy. I don't know what to tell you. You got problems in life. You should stop caring about the race of people and start caring about their character. It's kind of like someone really smart once said that, and we should listen to him. Anyway, let's move on to topic 3. Nancy Macy bears it all in Congress. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. How long have we been on this podcast? Okay, yeah, we're going to wrap this up. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Nancy Macy, who many of you don't know, many of you will know, she's a Republican representative. She made a speech to a House Oversight Committee. And during the speech, as they always want to do, they put up props. She had these big poster boards with an enlarged, really grainy photo that she says are nude photos of her that were taken without her consent. Now, they were taken from a security camera by her ex-fiance, which is in his living room. She says it's a hidden camera. He says, no, it's just a security camera. I have security cameras in my house. Doesn't matter. She making all sorts of accusations about how he did this. He's got 10,000 photos of her and other women that are into his house, and how it's actually a group of people that they take photos of people without their consent and do things with them. I'm not sure. She's alleged this all in Congress, on the floor and in these meetings, and she's never tried to make it a criminal matter because that would open her up to civil liability. When you do it in Congress, apparently you have some sort of immunity. I didn't know this. You're basically allowed to impugn the character of people in the congressional halls, and it's not exactly immunity, but it makes it very difficult to prosecute a civil case against you for defamation if you do it in Congress, which is kind of a wild thing. So anyway, Nancy Macy has made these a couple of times, and this is the first time she's brought some nude photos of herself to Congress. And I mean, Nancy Macy is a very good-looking woman. I did all the research for you. You don't have to go look up the photos yourself. So all you see is like the photos she's holding up. They're just real grainy security footage from a house. It's not like this guy had a peephole and a telescopic lens and was taking pictures. It just looks like a security camera. And I don't know this story, but it brings up one. So I don't know if the guy's really a creep or if she's kind of blowing this all out of proportion, but it brings up an interesting question. What is a reasonable right to privacy? Because that's what we're talking about. Do I have a reasonable right to privacy in my home? The answer is yes, I should. I should have a reasonable right to privacy in my home. Do I have a reasonable right to privacy in another person's home? Well, I think some people would say yes, and some people would kind of argue no. And the reality is yes and no. If I go to another person's house and they have a camera in their living room and I choose to strip down and walk around naked, did I have a reasonable right to privacy? Should they have informed me that there's a camera in their living room? I don't know, maybe. I don't know. It's their home. Are you allowed to have security cameras in your home? Do I have to tell every single person who walks in, hey, you're being recorded? It's not a 7-Eleven. I don't have to put a sign up in my house that says there's cameras present and you're going to be recorded. I don't feel like someone should expect that in my personal domicile. Now, if I'm putting a camera in the guest bathroom, a toilet camera, then obviously I think I violated someone's reasonable right to privacy. I think in this culture we have a reasonable right to privacy in the bathroom or in our bedroom. So if there's a camera in my guest bedroom, and I have people over and I don't let them know, is that a violation of privacy? Maybe. But in the living room? Or what about my bedroom? If I have a camera in my bedroom and someone comes over and they get naked in my bedroom, do I have to inform them about a camera in my own home? It brings up some interesting questions. But the answer is, should you have a reasonable right to privacy in someone else's house? The answer is probably no in most cases. And I'm not saying that what this guy did is good. I don't know anything about it. Could be a creep, could be a terrible person, but it brings up an interesting question about what is a reasonable right to privacy. I don't have a reasonable right to privacy in public. People can take videos of me. People can take pictures of me. If I'm sitting at a restaurant, somebody has the right to come up and videotape me. It might be annoying, but I can't just say, hey, don't videotape me. You don't have this right, because they absolutely do. I'm in public. I'm in a public place. If I'm on private property and somebody is taking photos of me on my private property, that's not, there is a reasonable right to privacy. I don't think it should be legal to take photos into someone's home, even from the street. I don't think that should be the case. But anyway, the whole reason I'm bringing this up is because, one, I think it's kind of weird to use your time on the floor of the most powerful legislative body in the world to show new photos of yourself. I don't know. I get you're trying to make a point that, hey, I'm a victim too, but I don't think it's a good look. And two, it brings up some interesting questions about what the expectations are for people moving forward. And I don't know the answer, and I don't know this story. So I'm not saying Nancy Macy is doing something wrong. I'm not saying this guy is doing something wrong. I'm just saying the whole thing is just sleazy and gross. And I don't think, if you're a guy, by the way, let me talk to you men folk out there for a second. If you're a guy, and now as this generation does, you happen to get some nude photos of somebody sends you some things, and you send those to other people, I think you're a sleazebag. I really do. I don't think you should be doing that. I think it's a bad thing. I think, there's become this thing where, or you put it, maybe you're not a sleazebag, but you're making a terrible, terrible choice. If you put it up on the internet, that revenge porn, I really do think that should be a crime. Somebody's giving you a picture of themselves. Now, obviously, that person should really consider who they're sending nude photos to. I don't think you should just be posting naked pictures of yourself and sending them to random people. I think that's a bad thing. But if you're the kind of person who then wants to put those on the internet because you get mad or whatever the case is, you also, that is somewhat of a gray area, but also you're a bad person. Don't do that. That's a bad thing to do. It doesn't make you the good guy. You should strive to be the good guy. Be moral. Be good. So this whole situation with Nancy Mace is just kind of sleazy. I don't really know what's going to happen. Her ex-fiance is alleging that if she says this ever outside the Hall of Congress, he's going to sue her. So, he seems to be reasonably sure that he would win, or at least he is representing himself that way. Again, I don't know the story. You don't know the story. We can't make judgments. Don't show naked photos of yourself to Congress. I think that's a good place to end it. Anyway, we're going to leave it there for the week. As always, I am Tyler Chrestman. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Like, comment, subscribe. Do all the fun things I tell you to do every week, and I will catch you next Friday.